Welcome this day to River of Living Water Revival School. This is the channel which brings to you special information revealed in the Bible, which has the power to influence your internal supernatural personality. I am also here sending to you warm and best wishes on your life and your family networks. Please welcome this day. Today we are going to look at an interesting topic concerning the families and family networks. We are calling the topic today Supernatural Complexity in Unit Families and Family Networks. Supernatural complexities in unit families and family networks. In modern age, we realize that people and individuals, unit families, and family networks are faced by enormous problems. People are faced in modern age by enormous problems. And these problems affect both parents and children, and some of these problems, which are found in families, in individual lives, in family networks, and also as patterns, following patterns in families. Here I've given us an example of some of these problems. We find that people may have difficulties accessing revenue and resources. People have problems working out resources, both internal and external, to gain or generate revenue. People have difficulties defining possibilities and opportunities. Like we have seen in the video of the curriculum in this channel, we will see that in a widespread way that our students and the young potential, the young resource in our nations is experiencing a aborted potential developmental process. And this thing happens in both parents and children. You find that when this developmental process has aborted early, most of the times you find that the young ladies become mothers very early. And so they are not able to progress with their developmental process of their potential in colleges or tertiary education. We find that people these days are faced greatly by mysterious and incurable diseases. Mysterious and incurable diseases. There are relational problems in the families. Families are experiencing great relational problems. We are also seeing in modern age that there are big problems. There are great problems in people, young professionals, in finding, there's great problem in them finding spouses. And these are becoming a common phenomenon in our society today. People are facing difficulties working out resources, both internal and external. That is, people are not able to use their internal resource to work out the external resources that are in their environment. We are finding great scattering of peoples and families. We are finding people's enterprises greatly scattered among individuals. We find that a person leaves a very good job to go and start a business, and we really find a great scattering in many people, where some succeed well. There are others that experience great scattering. We also must realize that there have been frequent deaths in families. Mysterious, unexplainable accidents have also followed individuals and followed families. This list is not exhaustive, and anyone listening will be able to identify many such difficulties and problems which are facing individuals, families, and family networks, and then the larger society. And these are problems that education, money, technology are not able to provide solutions for. Education, money, even technology has not provided solution for these problems. And we find that people are left with no one to help them. People are left with great problems with no help in sight. And we remember an encounter where also Jesus looked at how the crowd, how people kept following him. If he was in a boat and going to anchor at the shore, he will find multitudes and multitudes of people waiting for him on the other side. And he looked at the people and he said, they are like sheep without a shepherd. He realized that people had so many problems. People were following Jesus in droves because in thousands and thousands from so many of their towns and locations, because they had realized that Jesus had supernatural power to help them. There are many ways that Jesus was able to break the yoke of bondage, of supernatural control in their lives. And that is why they kept following him. And Jesus acknowledged that the people were like sheep without a shepherd, because the earthly system, the systems of men, of education, of money, of technology, of sophistication and advancement has not provided solutions to supernatural, to internal supernatural problems. So we are going to look now into the supernatural system or supernatural highway. A supernatural highway which transcends from the being of God to every individual into the society. In my channel, The River of Living Water Revival School, I have posted several videos in which I have greatly addressed and at length addressed the issue of our supernatural nature. The issue of our supernatural nature. And when we come to the fact that is revealed in the Word of God, that we are supernatural in nature, created in the image of God and in his likeness, as being the breath of God who was introduced into the house of man, light will start coming into our beings. Light will start coming into our minds to see why we have such incredible problems that not even education or money or technology has been able to dissolve these problems. And only Jesus was able to break this yoke upon the people. So I invite you to please listen to several of my videos in this channel, where I have talked about our supernatural identity, so that you can get the foundation of where this topic is advancing from. So I have discussed in these channels a lot to show why we are supernatural in nature and why we are greatly affected by authorities that emanate from the supernatural system, from the supernatural highway, which comes from the being of God to every person. All over the 8 billion of people or 9 billion of people on earth, or all the peoples of the earth that have passed through trillions of people who have passed through the planet of the earth. Every such human being possesses a body and a supernatural soul. And the creative, active center of potential is the supernatural personality who comes from the being of God as the breath of life. I have talked about this thing in very, very many videos. Please look them up so that you may create and build this foundation. And the creative and active and center of potential within a human being is the supernatural personality who comes from the being of God as the breath of life. And we see that this kind of scenario is found in individuals, even among the people within the unit families, even people among the unit family networks, even genealogical networks that are passed, and even within the societies. They possess, their personality is supernatural in nature. And so this supernatural persona from the being of God is in every personality, every person who is living on earth today, and all those who have lived on the earth before. And so humanity bloodlines, humanity bloodlines and humanity genealogical systems, families, unit families and family networks, and even individuals, they carry a very, very powerful supernatural proportion within the society of peoples, whether it is the unit family, whether it is the family network, whether it is the society at large. We must acknowledge that there is a powerful supernatural proportion which exerts incredible supernatural influence on people's lives. And this forms the supernatural system or the supernatural highway which originates from the being of God, Actually, it is at this time of human history, and also at this time of church history, this is the critical moment for us to go back to the Word of God, to look up these truths that are hidden, that we have not used before, and live to these truths about us. We cannot go backwards. The problems that are facing humanity in this age and in the future will be such problems that people will require to be empowered with the truth about themselves, especially the truth which is revealed in the Word of God. Science is always doing research to expose to us scientific truths that people can use. At the moment, people are being advised on how to protect themselves from the onslaught of COVID-19 through scientific research. And so the Word of God also carries information that we have not used in the past, that is able to strengthen us and empower us and give us a great light and great understanding about who we are and where we come from and where the problems that face us, the problems that are threatening our lives, where they come from, and how to deal with these problems, supernatural problems. So the supernatural system which transcends from the being of God permeates into every person, unit families, family networks, and even the society. And so we are saying that this supernatural system, this supernatural highway, this supernatural system that comes from the being of God through every person, family units, and family networks, and the society is under the order. This system is under the order and the regulation of God's supernatural commands. It is under the order and regulation of God's supernatural commands. We are saying that this supernatural highway that runs within people and families and societies it functions, and is supposed to comply according to God's supernatural commands, according to God's supernatural order of righteousness. Which means that every individual, young or old, is greatly intertwined with God's laws, with God's systemic order, with God's designs, with God's supernatural matrix. Every person, whether it is a child, a baby, or an old person, every person is intertwined with this God's supernatural system. And God has given us the example of the life of Adam and Eve. The life of Adam and Eve. And in fact, in the book of Genesis, it shows us clearly. It shows us clearly how he brought this system into place, how he created this system. And he ordered it by the command. By the command of Genesis 2, verse 28. That command is a supernatural law. And there is also the supernatural law of marriage and childbirth and childbearing and multiplication of peoples. That there's a command, which is a word, which is a law that sustains the growth and the continuous generation of the societies, which comes from the mouth of God. And so we learn from the life of Adam and Eve that when individuals or families violate these laws of God's supernatural system, when people or individuals or families violate these laws of God, we realize and we see from the life and the family of Adam and Eve that supernatural negative scattering and wasting repercussions we always follow automatically when somebody violates God's laws of righteousness. These negative scattering and wasting repercussions will follow automatically without any pain or without any force, but silently, that these negative scattering repercussions, they follow individuals and families. Today, societies of the world, today, the society of the world today, the societies of the world today in the year 2020, they originate from Adam and Eve's third son, Seth. So the society of modern times originate from the third child of Adam and Eve, who was called Seth. Because we know that Abel was killed by Cain, and Cain, although he raised a family, he was cast by God to forever be an outcast from the society. So we see that in Genesis chapter 4, verse 23 to 24, it reports of a case in which Lamech, a great grandson of Cain, who was born in the 7th generation, how he killed a young man. And we know this is the same sin of the father Cain, who killed his younger brother. As young men, he killed his younger brother. And you can see his great down the line of his descendants. In the 7th generation, Lamech also killed a young man. So we see that from the early onset of Adam and Eve bloodlines, we see rebellion, we see disobedience, we see jealousy, we see hardness of heart towards God, we see murder and great scattering. We can see all these problems become inherent in the family of Adam and Eve. We also know that the descendants of Seth also were people with great abominations, and God was greatly unhappy. God was greatly unhappy with the descendants of Seth. And so he destroyed them all through the great flood. He destroyed them all through the great flood and only saved Noah's family. We are saying that this happened in these early societies. These are catastrophic devastations that manifested themselves in the early societies. In the early societies, mainly because of the power of the supernatural system that runs through families, individuals, and to the societies. We can see that the sin of Adam and Eve, of disobedience, violating God's law, the sin of rebelling against the first law of God of righteousness, that was a sin of transgression that follows every person to date. It follows every person to date, even in the modern generations. And what we are seeing here is that the sin of generations is able to follow the descendants for generations and generations to come. And so we are looking at this complex supernatural system that runs through families. It runs through the unit family, it runs through family networks, through individuals, and into the societies. We realize that these problems, these supernatural problems, these manifestations of problem because of supernatural violations and supernatural sources, because of supernatural roots. There are supernatural roots that are manifesting all the problems that are affecting humanity today. And because of this, people are looking for ways to find solutions. The world today is made up of many societies of people. Many societies of people that have similarities. They have similarities of language. They have this similarity of genetics. They have similarities of religion. They have similarities of culture. So we find that there's the whole multitude of populations of the earth are categorized into societies. And many of these societies have their own defined way of interacting with the supernatural system. The supernatural authority among people and for societies is therefore a force which really rules and controls people's lives. And people have created their own order. Societies create their own order of connecting with the supernatural systems. And this order, they call it a religion. So from Adam and Eve, from the example of Adam and Eve, we learn that violation of God's laws of correct order in family and individuals will automatically bring negative repercussions. These authorities are passed on from generation to generation through bloodlines. They are passed on from generation to generation through bloodlines. And this is how the sin of Adam and Eve has been passed on to modern humanity in this way. The sin of Adam and Eve has been passed on from generation through thousands of generations, has been passed on to every individual. To every individual. Every individual still has a price to pay because of the sin of Adam and Eve. People at times wonder where problems come from, where families are so scattered, where there is so much disease, where there is so much poverty in societies, and where there is so much scattering. At times, the modernity and sophistication and technological advancement and the glories of modern age may seem to cover the deep problems that face people. But people, whether they are rich, whether they are millionaires or billionaires or very, very poor, people are followed by supernatural roots that affect their lives and their families in one way or another. So the sin of Adam and Eve has been passed on to modern humanity in this way through the bloodlines. And we find that also societies, these localized, identified societies, have their way of governing their people. And their way of governing the people, if it violates God's laws of righteousness, even when they don't know, even when people don't know what is God's laws of righteousness, whatever spiritual systems called religion, whatever spiritual system that people create that govern their lives and their interactions in the society, if it violates the law, God's laws of righteousness, we all know that these spiritual systems just continue to compound people's supernatural problems in a more and more complex manner. Societies of people have defined their own spiritual systems called religions. And if these religions, if the procedures and processes of these religions do not comply with God's laws of righteousness, their activities will always compound the violations of God's law. And a people over generations and generations continue to find themselves in complex web-like supernatural chaos. People continue to be compounded in a complex web-like supernatural chaos. And this is manifested, this supernatural chaos is manifested in myriads and myriads of problems in people's lives and families which never end. Problems which never end. Many times we think that when we have a lot of money and we are able to invest and have resources, we tend to think that this problem will go because we have money and we have got good jobs. But these problems do not go. They cannot be removed by education. They cannot be removed by money because they have a supernatural root. These problems have a supernatural root. And today, people are consorting. They are consorting and visiting more with people who are supernatural resource, people who have supernatural abilities, people who have supernatural abilities to see and tell them what is happening, what is the root of the problems. So people are very much these days looking for solutions from people who have this supernatural capacity, people with supernatural capacity to see where the problems are coming from. And we realize that one of the greatest persons, supernatural personality, the greatest supernatural personality who walked within the face of the earth, who was also born within one of our family bloodlines. He was born in one of the family bloodlines of the society. He is the one who died and he rose from the dead. He is one person who revealed to humanity that he is not controlled by laws of gravity. The law of gravity cannot control him because he walked on the water. He showed that the scientific laws, or the chemical scientific laws, cannot control him because he changed water into ethanol, which has got carbon. He also he also raised the dead. He showed that the authority and the power of death cannot control him. And he called out people from the dead. And he himself, he was killed on the cross and he rose again from the dead. So this is one very powerful, supreme, supernatural personality who exposed in his working. In his working, he showed that he has the power even over life systems. Remember when he cursed the fig tree and it died. The fig tree died because it did not have any fruit. He showed that many of the supernatural laws that control humanity, he is not controlled by these supernatural laws. He is above supernatural laws. We know that he himself was not affected by the authority of gravity because at the end, his disciples give evidence that he was lifted up against gravity. He went back to heaven by being lifted up against gravity. And so he is one person who is very powerful, supernaturally powerful. And he is the one that God provided to humanity so that he can come and help humanity understand their supernatural nature. Understand their supernatural nature. Understand where the problems that we face come from. And he also came to create a new way, a new process that people could use, that people could interact with, and people could understand things better. And solutions could be provided from him through this process. His name is Jesus Christ. His name is Jesus Christ, the one who died, and today he lives. And so God sent Jesus, who is life. Jesus said he's the resurrection and life. Jesus is the person who has the supernatural authority. Jesus was able, in many circumstances, he was able to show that he was able to read the minds of people, what they were thinking. He was able to see Nathanael from under the tree, even when he was very far away. And Jesus was able to predict very easily what his disciples were going to do in the next few days, how they are going to run away from him when he is persecuted. So Jesus is one great supernatural persona who is a supernatural authority and who is above all peoples who have supernatural prowess. He is above all people with supernatural prowess. And he is the one who was sent by God to come and provide a solution to heal and solve this supernatural cancer. Because people of all walks of life, they suffer from an internal, hidden, painless, supernatural cancer. And that is why people have got so many problems today. People flock in churches in multitudes and multitudes and multitudes. People feel steadier, listening to the man of God in hope that the words that he is speaking are going to provide an answer and a solution in their lives. That the words are going to break the yoke and tomorrow the day will be different. Why do people flock to people like this? It is because of this supernatural cancer. And the only answer is through Jesus Christ. The only answer is from God through his son Jesus Christ. That has been given to us. That has been given to us. This, I come to the end of this discussion of the complexity, of the supernatural complexity that is within families, within unit families and family networks and individuals. And I hope that it may shed some light because it talks to us of the applicability of the supernatural nature, of our supernatural nature that comes from the being of God. It helps us to see why it is so critical for us to understand where we come from and what is our nature, so that we may see what is revealed in the Word of God and see how this supernatural nature, whether it is in our interactions in families, whether it is through the children that are born in families, how violations are transmitted through this process of marriage and childbirth. And if it has got blessings, it will carry blessings. if it has curses because of violations of God's order, or if there are curses because somebody within the society or in the family system placed a spell or a curse, it will be transmitted through the bloodline. It will be transmitted through the bloodline to the other generations. And so the supernatural arena in a person and in family units, in family networks, in the society is a very, very active arena. And it is from this dimension that most of the problems that people are facing today are coming from. And our enlightenment in this area will help us to use the resources that have been provided for us and also embrace the truth that has been revealed to us. And where we need to make correction, we make correction where we have made corrections, where we have made violations, where we have made omissions. Where we have made omissions. These days, people are not reminded of the 10 commandments. People are not reminded of the commandments and the instructions of God, because the whole of the Bible is full of commands and regulations and instructions. Even Jesus came to add the instructions and show us how to follow the instructions of God. And because of these continuous violations of God, we find that in a situation like this of COVID-19, we may find that our lives are entangled in sin. Our lives are entangled in violations. Our lives are entangled in abuses, in defiling other people with abuses and judgments and desecrations. And because of this, we may find that we may fall victims of the attacks of this disease. And so this is a very critical moment for us to address this supernatural problem, so that we are not ignorant, so that we do not separate this pestilence of COVID-19 from our activities, from our supernatural violations. And it is important for people to address these scenarios. In the video that we have read about the curses of disobedience, I have asked the question, is COVID-19 a manifestation of a curses of disobedience? Because its pattern and the way it has come upon humanity, it shows great congruence with other such scenarios of judgment and punishments that have come upon peoples because of forgetting God, because of dishonoring God, because of turning to other gods, because of abominations and desecrations, and just creating our own gods. And in our sophisticated world, we have forgotten God. We have forgotten God in our own research developments and technology and advancement and sophistication and enlightenment. God seems to be just like a shadow. What is written in the Word of God seems to be just like a shadow that has no influence in our lives. But the Word of God is the only information that reveals to us about our supernatural nature. Is the one volume that has great details about the supernatural dimension of a human being and all authorities that are able to destroy a person's life that come because of violation of supernatural systems of God. And to know that the societies themselves are founded on the supernatural system which comes from the being of God and transcend through every person, So every person has to address this matter of COVID-19 in the light of your supernatural nature, in the light of the order, in the light of the order of God. I trust that this word may help you shine some light in this area, and you'll be able to do what you need to do in this era of COVID-19. May God greatly bless you.